I came home from a work trip to find my husband had changed the locks and moved his mom into our room. She said, "This house needs a woman's touch." I picked up my phone and said, "Then call your daughter because your son's going to be single." My name is Camille. I'm 42 years old, and I live in Catonsville, Maryland, a quiet suburb just outside of Baltimore. Most days, my life's a steady rhythm: early mornings, emails over coffee, flights out by noon, and check-ins at hotel rooms with too cold air conditioning. I work as a corporate trainer for a healthcare company, which means I spend a lot of time on the road helping new offices get off the ground. It's not glamorous, but I've made a name for myself and I'm good at what I do. I've been married to Marcus for 13 years. He's an IT guy, remote job, likes things neat, hates change unless it's planned 3 months ahead. We met at a music festival in D.C., back when we were both in our 20s and broke. It was one of those hot August nights where your clothes stick to your back and everyone's too sweaty to care. He made me laugh. He was solid. Dependable. I loved that about him. We never had kids. Not because we couldn't, just because we didn't want to. We liked our freedom. We liked waking up late on Sundays, making pancakes, watching bad crime dramas in bed. Or at least, I thought we did. Anyway, this all started when I came home from a 5-day work trip to Indianapolis. I was training new staff at a clinic we'd just acquired. The days were long, the hotel coffee was awful, and I couldn't wait to get back home to my own bed, my own shower, and maybe, if I was lucky, Marcus's famous black bean chili. My flight landed at BWI around 7 p.m. I grabbed a cab, watching the trees blur past the window as we neared the familiar turns of my neighborhood. I remember feeling that warm little flutter you get when you're almost home, when everything's about to click back into place. I walked up to our front door, luggage in tow, and slid my key into the lock. Nothing. I jiggled it, tried again. It didn't budge. At first, I thought maybe the lock was jammed, or maybe Marcus had left the deadbolt on. I knocked. Rang the bell. Waited. Rang it again. About a minute later, I heard the soft shuffling of footsteps. The door opened. And there she was. "Camille," said Gladys, standing in the doorway like she owned the place. She was wearing my robe, the soft gray one I kept on the hook in our bathroom, and had her hair wrapped up in one of our good towels. I stared at her, stunned. What are you doing here?" She looked me up and down like I was the one who'd shown up uninvited. "You didn't say you'd be back early." "My flight was scheduled." "What do you mean early?" I tried to push past her, but she didn't move. "Why isn't my key working?" "Marcus changed the locks," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "He thought it was time for a fresh start." I froze. "What?" My voice came out sharp. I hadn't even taken a step inside yet. She stepped aside like she was granting me permission. "Come on in. We're making pot roast tonight." Marcus ran to the store for carrots. I walked inside, rolling my suitcase behind me. The house was different. The change was subtle, but I felt it immediately. The couch had a new throw blanket on it. My indoor plants were moved around. A new rug, beige and floral, lay by the entryway. And the photo that had once hung above the mantel, our wedding photo, was gone. In its place was a framed picture of Marcus and Gladys, both smiling like they'd just won something. "What the HLL is going on?" I asked. Gladys was already halfway to the kitchen. The house needed a woman's touch. My mouth went dry. My vision narrowed. I pulled out my phone and said, "Calm and steady, then call your daughter, because your son's going to be single." Gladys stopped in her tracks. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." I turned and walked down the hallway toward the bedroom. But the room I stepped into wasn't mine anymore. My clothes? Gone. My nightstand? Empty. The vanity I'd used every morning for a decade was replaced with a heavy oak dresser topped with pill bottles and lotion. Her lotion. Her perfume. A goddamn CPAP machine sat on the side of the bed where Marcus used to sleep. I felt dizzy. I sat on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. This wasn't a bad dream. This was happening. I called Marcus. Voicemail. Called again. Straight to voicemail. I stood up, walked out of the room, and stared at Gladys. "Where are my things?" She shrugged. "Marcus boxed them up. Said you could get them when you were ready." "When I was ready." "Ready for what, exactly?" "Space. You're always gone, Camille. He's lonely. I'm here to support him. You should be grateful someone cares enough to stay." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This isn't support. This is trespassing. It's his house too. I grabbed my bag, walked out the front door, and drove to a hotel. I didn't cry until I was alone in the room. The next morning, I called his sister, Talia. We weren't close, barely saw each other on holidays, but she picked up. "Camille," she answered, confused. Hey, everything okay? No, I said. I need to ask you something. Did Marcus tell you he changed the locks? She was silent for a second. Wait, what? No. Why would he? I told her everything. She was horrified. That doesn't make sense. I mean, yeah, Mom's been saying stuff like, Marcus needs someone who's around more, but I thought it was just her usual crap. I didn't think he'd. Jesus. Do you know where he is? She sighed. No, but I'll call him. You okay? No, but thanks for asking. Marcus didn't call me back until 3 days later. I was eating breakfast alone at the hotel when his name popped up on my screen. Hello? I answered, trying to keep my voice even. He sounded tired. Hey, hey. I laughed bitterly. That's all you have to say? I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Oh, how is it supposed to happen, Marcus? I come home from work to find my key doesn't work, your mother living in our room, and you unreachable for days? I just needed some space. Then ask for space. Don't erase me from my own damn home. He sighed. You're always gone. It feels like I'm alone in that house. We've talked about this. You knew what my job was. You supported me. You celebrated my promotions. Yeah, well, things change. I was silent. Then I said, how long have you been planning this? He hesitated. That long, huh? I didn't plan it. It just happened. People don't accidentally change locks, Marcus. That takes forethought, permission, intent. I just wanted to feel like I had control over something. You wanted control, so you gave my life away to your mother? He didn't respond. I hung up. The divorce proceedings started a few weeks later. I lawyered up. So did he. And let me tell you, that's when I saw the real Marcus. The one who claimed I was emotionally distant. That I'd neglected him. That I was too career-focused. That I'd checked out of the marriage long ago. My lawyer, Rachel, was a shark. She found the accounts he'd been funneling money into, pulling from our joint savings without telling me. We subpoenaed bank records. She grilled him in mediation. And he crumbled. Gladys tried to come to the first hearing. I had her removed. This wasn't just a breakup. It was war. And I didn't want war. I wanted answers. But the more I dug, the more I realized I'd been living with a stranger. Someone who resented my independence. Someone who smiled through his teeth while quietly rewriting the story of our marriage. And the worst part? I missed the version of him I thought was real. But that version was gone. So I started over. I moved into a short-term rental in Ellicott City, about 10 minutes away from the house. Well, my house, even if Marcus and his mother were still occupying it like squatters. The rental was a small 2-bedroom duplex behind a bakery. It smelled like cinnamon and yeast every morning, which should have been comforting, but honestly, I could barely taste food at that point. Stress was eating me alive. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. with my heart racing, not sure if I dreamt everything or if it had really happened. And then I'd look around the unfamiliar walls, feel the cold absence of everything I built for 13 years, and remember, oh, right, this is my new reality. Rachel, my attorney, was relentless. We're going for the house, she said over coffee one morning. You paid for more than half the down payment. Your name's on the mortgage. And we've got receipts for every renovation, every paint can, every backsplash tile, every light fixture. You gave him the life he has, Camille. I blinked at her, too tired to cry. I don't even want the house anymore, I whispered. Not really. Wanting it and deserving it are different, she said flatly. You don't let people walk all over you and call that healing. Meanwhile, Marcus was unraveling. Talia kept in touch with me, quietly updating me on what she heard from the family. He's not doing well, she told me during one phone call. Gladys is basically running his life now. She goes through his mail, pays his bills, tells him what to wear. He's like a teenager again, but angrier. He made his bed, I said, though part of me hated how bitter I sounded. Mom thinks she won, she added. She keeps saying things like, see, he just needed someone who understands him. Like she doesn't even realize she blew up your marriage. She doesn't care, I said. She never did. A month after filing, I stopped by the house, with my lawyer's knowledge, to pick up the rest of my things that Marcus hadn't already donated or thrown into random boxes like garbage. I arranged it ahead of time, sent him a list. When I got there, the door opened and Marcus was waiting. Camille, he said softly, almost like a sigh. You look different. I looked down at myself. I was thinner, paler, worn out. But I held my chin up. Stress looks good on me, I said. He stepped aside. Let me in. The house was cold. Sterile. Every trace of my warmth, of my taste, was gone. The walls were bare. The furniture was stiff and formal, like it belonged in a waiting room. Gladys must have redecorated everything. She's at church, he offered. I didn't ask. He stood awkwardly as I moved through the house, collecting what was left, some photo albums, old cookbooks, a few keepsakes from my late grandmother. Most of it had been packed sloppily into cheap bins from the dollar store. Camille, I didn't mean for things to go this far, he said suddenly, breaking the silence. I turned to look at him, holding a framed photo of our first vacation together, Boston, in the rain, when we got lost and ended up laughing our way into a jazz bar. What did you think was going to happen, Marcus? I said, my voice quieter than I intended. That I'd just accept it? Move on? Pretend 13 years didn't happen. I thought maybe you'd understand. Understand what? I snapped. That you let your mother poison our marriage? That you wanted space so badly you cut me out of my own home like a stranger. He looked down. She was there when I needed someone. I was there. You just stopped seeing me. The silence that followed felt like an earthquake. I don't even know who you are anymore, I said. He didn't argue. As I walked out, he said, do you think we could ever fix it? I didn't even turn around. Weeks passed. Then months. I started therapy. Twice a week, then once. I didn't even realize how much I was carrying until someone sat across from me and asked, and what did you want? It took me a minute to answer. What had I wanted? I thought I'd wanted a partner. Someone who respected me. Who cheered for me when I succeeded, who caught me when I stumbled. And maybe I did want those things. But I also wanted a life, a full one. And somewhere along the line, I started shrinking myself to keep Marcus comfortable. Every time I delayed a trip because he pouted. Every time I skipped a work dinner to make it home in time to cook. Every time I turned down a bigger promotion because he didn't want to move. I gave and gave and gave. And when I stopped giving, he gave up. One evening in late March, I ran into Gladys at the grocery store. Of course, she was in the floral department, criticizing the arrangement of tulips. I tried to pass by her without a word, but she spotted me. Camille, she called out, all bright and fake. Well, don't you look different? I stopped. Slowly turned to her. It's called peace, I said simply. She laughed. Peace? Please. Marcus told me you've been crying to your lawyer. Trying to bleed him dry. I'm getting what I'm owed, I said. And I earned every cent of it. She raised an eyebrow. You know, you could have saved this marriage if you'd just been around more. You moved into my bedroom while I was working to support the house you're now living in, I snapped. Her mouth twitched. You think this is a win for you? Living with your adult son? Managing his emails? Folding his socks? That's not love, Gladys. That's control. She huffed. He's better off without someone who treats marriage like a business. I took a deep breath, leaned in slightly, and said, then you can be the CO, because I quit. I walked away without waiting for her response. The encounter with Gladys at the grocery store left a strange taste in my mouth. Not bitterness, no, that had long passed. It was more like emptiness. Like I had been holding on to something for so long, convinced that one final confrontation would bring me peace, and when it finally came, I felt nothing. And in a way, that was even scarier. I got in my car, sat in the parking lot for a while with the radio off, and just stared out the windshield. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was tired. Tired of carrying everything on my back. My pride, my silence, my restraint, my damn near textbook perfect self-control. So when I got back to the duplex, I poured myself a glass of wine, turned my phone off, and decided I wasn't going to think about Marcus or his mother for the rest of the night. Easier said than done. The next day, I received an email from my lawyer's assistant with the subject line, Asset Review, Need Clarification. I opened it, thinking it would be another document or a court date. Instead, it included a forwarded email from Marcus. In it, he was contesting my right to certain personal effects from the house, namely, my mother's antique dining set that we'd been using for years. He claimed that since it had been in joint use during the marriage, it was technically communal property. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. I could almost hear Gladys's voice behind it. Rachel called me later that afternoon. You saw his email? I did. He's getting desperate. That table isn't even listed as a high-value asset. It's sentimental. You inherited it. It's the last thing I have of hers, I said. I know. Don't worry. He's grasping at straws. But that wasn't the only thing that showed up in court filings that week. He had also submitted an emotional burden statement, trying to argue that I owed him compensation for the mental toll of the divorce. I kid you not, Rachel said, flipping through papers during our meeting. He's alleging emotional distress because you withheld affection and chose work over the relationship. Is this a divorce case or a bad soap opera? I muttered. She smirked. He's trying to weaponize every ounce of guilt you've ever had. It worked a little. I went home that night and found myself replaying every argument we ever had, every trip I rescheduled, every time I said, I can't tonight, I've got to be up early. I remembered the times he reached for my hand on the couch and I was too deep in an email chain to notice. But then I also remembered the resentment in his eyes when I got promoted. The way he'd sulk after events where people complimented my work. The way he'd say, you'd be nothing without that job, then brush it off as a joke. So no, I wasn't about to take the fall for all of it. We both broke the marriage, we just did it in different ways. A couple weeks later, the weather started to turn. Spring in Maryland is messy. One day you're sweating in a t-shirt, the next you're wearing a scarf again. But I found myself waking up earlier, going on walks. I'd started to breathe again. Just a little. One afternoon, I was browsing a small bookstore in downtown Ellicott City when I heard someone say my name. Camille? I turned and saw Jenna, an old friend I hadn't seen in years. We'd worked together briefly back when I first started at the company. She'd moved away, gotten married, had a kid. We'd drifted. But she looked almost exactly the same, just a little more tired around the eyes, like most of us now. We got coffee and caught up. I told her what had happened, bracing for the wide-eyed pity, but instead, she just nodded. My ex's mom moved in with us for 6 months, she said. I thought I was gonna end up on the news. We laughed. A real, solid laugh. She didn't treat me like I was broken. She didn't act like I'd failed. She just listened. It was the first time in months that I didn't feel like I had to defend myself. When I got home that night, I sat on the floor of the living room with a glass of wine and flipped through the old photo albums I'd finally unpacked. One of the pictures caught my eye, me and Marcus, 5 years into our marriage, smiling in front of a Christmas tree. I was holding a pie, he had one arm around my waist. I looked at my own face for a long time. There was a light in my eyes, a kind of joy I hadn't seen in years. I whispered to the photo, I miss who we were, but not who we became. Later that week, I got a call from Talia. Hey, she said. Weird question. Have you heard from Marcus lately? No. Why? He's not doing well. Like, at all. My stomach turned. What do you mean? He lost his job. The one he kept talking about retiring from? Downsizing. I didn't say anything. And Mom, she paused. She's not doing great either. She had a fall. Hurt her hip. He's been caring for her full-time. Something tightened in my chest. I didn't wish them harm, not really. But I wasn't going to feel guilty either. Why are you telling me this, Talia? Because I think he thought you'd come back. There was a long pause between us. Well, I said finally, he thought wrong. Weeks passed after that call with Talia. I didn't respond. I didn't follow up. I didn't even let my curiosity wander. I'd spent too much time and energy worrying about people who never did the same for me. By the time the divorce proceedings were heading into their final phase, I'd already begun to picture my new life. It wasn't perfect. There were still long nights and occasional pangs of loss, but it was mine. Mine in a way my old life had stopped being a long time ago. Then came the final mediation meeting. Marcus was there in person. It was the first time we'd seen each other face to face since that day in my house. He looked thinner, tired, less put together. His mother wasn't with him, but her fingerprints were all over the documents he brought. He still contested the dining set, still argued over the share of household items, still tried to shift blame. Rachel leaned in toward me, whispered, he's scrambling. Don't budge. I didn't. The judge assigned to our case finally spoke. Mr. Olander, she said, looking directly at him, I've reviewed your filings. It's clear Mrs. Olander has contributed significantly more toward the financial stability and development of your shared property. You, on the other hand, left your employment during this process, have failed to disclose certain funds in a timely manner, and have offered no verifiable proof that the dining set in question was obtained as a shared marital asset. Marcus cleared his throat. Your Honor, I've been under enormous stress. That's not relevant to the distribution of property. The law is clear. Marcus sat back, defeated. Effective immediately, the residence in Catonsville is to be transferred solely to Camille Olander. You, Mr. Olander, have 30 days to vacate the property. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. But I did finally exhale. A few days later, I returned to the house. The grass was overgrown. The front porch was cluttered with old flower pots, bags of stale potting soil, and one of those tacky garden flags with a cartoon cat on it. The kind of decor I'd never allow when I lived here. I knocked. No one answered. I unlocked the door with my key. Inside, it smelled like sadness. The air was thick, the blinds drawn, and the kitchen a mess. Gladys's things were still everywhere, but the soul of the house was gone. I walked through each room slowly, absorbing what it had become. And then I made a list. A long one. The day Marcus moved out, he didn't say a word to me. Just loaded a truck with the help of a cousin I'd never met. Gladys didn't show. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she wouldn't. I didn't care. Once he was gone, I got to work. I repainted everything. Tore out every curtain she'd hung. Replaced every dish towel. Got rid of the couch. Bought a bold, crimson velvet one. New art for the walls, nothing neutral, nothing apologetic. And then I did one last thing. I held a yard sale. Not to make money. Not even really to get rid of things. It was foreclosure. I sold anything that Marcus or Gladys had left behind that wasn't legally contested, his record collection. I always hated his taste in music, her sewing machine, the god-awful mirror they'd hung in the hallway. Neighbors came by. Friends. Even strangers. I watched as people carted off little pieces of that old life, and with every sale, I felt lighter. Then came the best part. Remember that antique dining set? The one he tried to claim, the one I fought tooth and nail for? I donated it. To a women's shelter in Baltimore. A young woman came to pick it up with tears in her eyes. "We've been serving dinner on folding chairs," she told me. "This is beautiful." "Thank you. It belonged to my mother," I said. She believed that women should always have a seat at the table. And if they couldn't find one, they should bring their own. She hugged me. That moment was worth more than any courtroom victory. Months later, I ran into Marcus again. It was late summer. I was at an art fair in Mount Vernon with a friend from work. Her teenage daughter had a booth selling handmade jewelry. I was laughing, actually enjoying myself, when I saw him. He looked older. Like life had kept coming at him, and he hadn't ducked. "Camille," he said. I turned, took a sip of my lemonade, and waited. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I live here," I said simply. He looked down. "The house looks different. A neighbor sent me a photo. You did a lot to it." "Yeah. It needed a woman's touch." That line landed hard. He nodded slowly. "You seem happy." "I am." He hesitated. I was angry. About everything. But I think I understand now. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to. Instead, I said, "You chose someone who made you feel safe over someone who challenged you to grow. That's fine. But don't mistake comfort for love." He didn't reply. "I hope your mom's doing okay," I added, more out of grace than concern. "She moved in with my aunt." I couldn't do it anymore. There it was. I offered a nod. "Take care of yourself, Marcus." And then I turned and walked away. That night, I sat on my back porch with a glass of wine, looking out at the yard I'd reclaimed, now with raised garden beds, wind chimes, and a hammock that I actually used. I thought about everything I'd lost, everything I'd survived, everything I'd chosen. And then I smiled. Not because it was over, but because I knew what came next would finally be mine.